Well, welcome to Break Away from the Rat Race. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Bryce Stewart. Bryce was a sixth grade public school teacher. He's been doing that for 9 years. And he and his wife eventually decided to have kids, as they normally do. And he quickly realized that he would need a source of income that would actually grow with his, that didn't have a ceiling, basically. And obviously, teaching has a definite ceiling. So he wanted to have a different source of income. And he decided to do house hacking and able to create kind of like a side income. His wife was eventually able to quit her W-2 job, and eventually Bryce also was able to quit his teaching job. And now they're focusing full-time on entrepreneurship and real estate investment. And today they own 38 units in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And he also wrote a book called House Hacker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Correct.
And so he's going to talk about that. Bryce, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to hopefully give value to your listeners. I think I have some great lessons and some good tools that I can point them towards that I think will help them on their journey to financial independence.
Yes, that sounds very good. Let's talk about your journey. Obviously, I'd give like a quick synopsis here of where you were and how you made the transition. And some of these transition, I know when I read them, I mean, it's for most people, it seems like a big step to quit your W-2 job, the security and safety that you get from getting a W-2 job. So tell us about your journey and kind of how this transition occurred.
Sure. Actually, we started in the worst possible position I think you could start in. Um, I graduated college in 2002. My wife graduated a few years later, and I'll start you with our moment of dire crisis. When we were first married, purchased a one-bedroom luxury condominium that had just been built. It was a new
Yeah.
build. And so we paid a very high price for it in 2006. So if your listeners don't know, in 2006, values were fairly elevated.
Yeah.
And in addition to that,
Or unfairly elevated.
right? Yeah. and and it was fine for the two of us when we moved into it because we were both young, we had just gotten married, and we were both working jobs. And I have to be honest with you, I never did any of the math going into it about how much does this place cost us to actually live here every month. And so it wasn't until we got pregnant in 2008 that I realized we wouldn't be able to stay in the one-bedroom luxury condominium. You know, we felt like we would need more space. That's when I started doing the math, and I realized a couple things that were terrible. One, the market was falling, and we couldn't sell our condo for anywhere close to what we owed on it.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea, we owed about $150,000, and similar units were selling for $90,000.
Oh.
So we were completely underwater. That's what that's called.
Yeah.
And then I started doing the math too of what it cost us to own the place every month. And when I added it all up, mortgage, interest, taxes, insurance, and then it was a condo, so HOA fees. Our total was $1,400 per month. And even if we rented it out, the going value for rents in even high-end one bedrooms was $1,100. So we were going to be losing $300 a month, or be completely underwater, or foreclose. So for someone who's a real estate investor at this point, we did not have very good beginnings. We started in the hole, and we were in serious trouble.
Yeah.
We ended up doing exactly what I described. We found a renter at $1,100. So we were losing $300 per month at the same time that we were adding another mouth to feed and potentially reducing my wife's ability to keep hours at her job.
Yeah.
And so we rented an apartment ourselves. We became renters, and then we simultaneously became landlords for the place that we're moving out of. And so we rented a two-bedroom, third floor walk up in the downtown area. And 5 months after my daughter was born, my first daughter was born, I came home from work. I finished work. I walked up the stairs and I walk into the third floor apartment and I see my wife in the middle of the living room floor, crying her eyes out.
Oh.
My newborn daughter in the crib, crying her eyes out. And I immediately, I freaked out. I said, "What's the matter? What's going on? What's the matter? Are you okay?" And my wife said, "I'm pregnant again."
Oh.
And so that was when I realized I really needed to become a student of the game of finances, because here we were already losing $300 per month. And now we were looking at adding another mouth to feed. My wife's job was going to be completely eliminated. I wouldn't have any salary income from her, and I was going to have four mouths to feed
Yeah.
while I was losing $300 a month.
Yeah, I know.
So talk
On
about,
a
and I
teacher's salary.
yeah, on a teacher's salary. So, they tell a joke. They say, what's the difference between a large pizza and a school teacher? And it's that a large pizza can feed a family of four. So I experienced that in real time. And, I was
Yeah.
panicked. We were already underwater on the condo. We were renting, and I was looking at adding another baby. So now let me take you back in time a little bit. So that was 2008, 2009. When I had just graduated college in 2003, I was working. This was before I met my wife. I worked at an insurance company, and I was still living in my parents' house. It was right after college,
Hmm.
and I had school debt, and I had a auto loan, and so I couldn't afford my own apartment because I had to make those payments, and
Yeah.
it would be too much. So I lived in my high school bedroom, and my dad was the kind of guy who said, "Hey, you have a job, you have a college degree. If you're still living here, you're going to pay rent."
Uh,
So I was paying $300 a month in rent to my dad and my mom. And I was a little bit embarrassed about that because here I was,
yeah.
23, and okay. So I'm working at this company and I meet another 23-year-old, same age as me. And he asked me where I live, and I kind of sheepishly say, I'm still crashing with my parents. And I ask him, where does he live? And he says he and his college roommate bought a 4-unit apartment building in Norristown, which is just outside of Philadelphia. And
Hmm.
each unit is 2 bedrooms. So they roomed together in one of the units, and then they rented the other 3 apartments out.
Oh, wow.
And Eric, I had never heard of anything like that in my life before when I was
Yeah.
23 years old. I don't
Yeah.
know if I wasn't paying attention, but it wasn't in my school curriculum in high
That's for
school
sure.
or in
Yeah.
college. My parents, I love my parents. They're both hard workers and responsible with money, but they were not entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
So, and they were not real estate investors. So I wasn't
Yeah.
going to get it from them.
Yeah.
And it's funny too. I grew up in suburbia, and I went to a 4-year dormitory college. So I
Yeah.
had never even rented an apartment myself. I didn't even understand. The only apartments I knew of were Jerry Seinfeld lived in an apartment, and Joey and Chandler on
Yeah.
Friends lived in an apartment. So when this guy said that he owned an apartment building, I didn't believe him even. I said,
Yeah. Yeah.
what do you mean you own it? I didn't think an individual person could own an apartment building.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
he said, no, we own it. It's ours. And so I asked him, well, isn't the mortgage really high every month? He said, well, it's not low, but we use the rents we get from the other 3 apartments to pay the mortgage every month.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what isn't there real estate taxes or insurance? He said, yeah, we use the rents from the other 3 units, and that's how we pay the taxes and insurance. And so I'm like, there's got to be some. I'm trying to poke holes in this guy's
Yeah. Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
I say, well, what
Yeah.
about like, I bet the water bill is really high, or the electric bill, or the heating bill, or the cable. And he says, well, actually, each of the units, they each have their own account and meter with the utility
Hmm.
company. We're not responsible for their usage. He said, but to be honest with you, we pay our utility bill with the money we get from the other 3 rents.
Yeah.
And so my mind just exploded. I said, I'm paying, you're living there for free?
Yeah.
I'm paying $300 a month to live in my thinking high school bedroom. And here you are telling me that you're living there for free. And he said, actually, it's better than that. We get $200 a month in spending money that goes right into our pockets. And Eric, I kid you not, I was upset. I was angry that
That you didn't figure it out
I
on
didn't
your
know.
own.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
just that no one had told me to do that, you know?
Hmm.
I went to a good school. I graduated magna cum laude. I
Yeah.
had gotten good grades in high school and in college, and nobody had ever told me before that you can make money from something besides your W-2 job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was angry,
Yeah.
and but I
Yeah.
was also
Schools are
inspired.
designed. They're designed to feed employees, feed companies employees. That's what
Yeah,
they're designed for. They're designed to for a job, a specific job that you're going to work, you're going to get a W-2 job. They're not there to, even the entrepreneurship programs that they talk about, it's really about working for somebody else that's going to be the entrepreneur.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So MBA is the same thing. Is if you want to be an administrator, director, VP, and stuff like that, and move up. It's going to be a W-2 job. Yeah, it's going to be highly paid, but it's going to be a W-2 job nonetheless.
Yeah. So, and as a teacher, I had all that
Yeah,
debt and was working a W-2,
yeah,
and there was just
mhm,
not even there's no year-end bonuses. There's no commissions when you're a
yeah,
teacher.
yeah,
Um, I love teachers. It's a great job, but I didn't have it. So
yeah.
that paints a picture for you. Okay. That was when I first graduated college. And that guy, I asked him, I said, who taught you how to do this? How did
Hmm.
you know that you could buy something like this? And he brought in a book for me the next day to work called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by
Yeah,
Robert Kiyosaki.
yeah,
And I devoured the book in maybe a day or a day and a half. I read it quickly, and
yeah.
I promised myself, if I ever get the chance to do something like that, I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
So fast forward back to my wife and I, have an infant daughter and a pregnant. My wife's pregnant with our second, and I realized at that time, okay, I need to figure out some way that I can use our housing situation to begin to supplement our income, like this guy had done that I knew when I was just
Yeah,
out of
yeah,
college. So the next day I pulled up to a red light. I saw a for sale sign on a house that looked like a duplex to me. It had two mailboxes and two electric meters. I called the listing agent. I asked if I could go and see it. I convinced my wife, who did not want to go see it. She actually, when I brought it up to her, she said, "Are you crazy? We already can't afford the one house that we do own, and now you want to buy another one?" And
exactly.
so we went, and here's the thing: that place that we saw, it was terrible. It was the tenants had cats. They were smoking cigarettes. It smelled awful. It was terrible. But it got us on an automatic email list for that listing agent who showed it to us, so that we started getting emails of all the multifamily uh, places that came on the market. And a couple weeks later, we got an email of a duplex that was really looked from the pictures very nice.
Yeah,
And we went to go see it, and it was gorgeous. The guy who was selling it had gutted it and renovated it. And the best part for us was, I'll give you the numbers for your listeners too. The principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, which
hmm,
are generally the fixed costs of home ownership,
yeah,
it totaled $1,200 per month. But it was a top bottom duplex, so we could live on the top two floors. It was like
yeah.
a three-bedroom apartment, and then the first floor, separate entrance, separate locks, separate, everything. They were paying $600 a month in rent.
Hmm.
And so for us, that meant that we could live there for only $600.
600. Yeah,
Yeah, which was cheaper than what we were paying in rent at
yeah.
the current place that we were.
Mm.
So we went through with it. We used what's called an FHA loan
Oh yeah. Hmm.
to purchase as owner occupants. That's a very small down payment, which was all I could
Yeah,
afford, was a small
yeah.
down payment as a teacher. And
Mm.
that was our first real entree into, I'll say, profitable real
Hmm.
estate investing, because our first purchase was decidedly unprofitable.
Yeah.
And it, you know what, it taught us a lot of great things. One, it taught us the power of real estate as a tool for financial independence and for supplementing your income. I didn't quit my teaching job right away. That
Yeah.
purchase just helped us to keep our noses above water.
Hmm.
But also we learned how to be landlords.
Hmm.
We learned in some ways how the financing game works. We learned how
Yeah.
to vet tenants. I learned how to, when we bought it, I could barely hang a picture. So I learned how to do
Yeah.
some handyman kind of work. And so that was our first purchase. And that taught me how to quantify a real estate purchase for what its fixed costs were going to be, and then how to figure out, what the revenues versus the costs would be, and see if it could be profitable,
Mm.
down the road.
Yeah, I think this is very important, and this is one thing that I see, and that you've talked about is kind of like do the math, like really figure out how much does it cost. To me, like the American dream is is about kind of like owning your own home and all of that, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to own your own home. It's cost more money. I live in California. I've lived in California for 20 years, and I can see young people that are trying to start a family. They want to buy a home, and they're accumulating like $300,000 down payment. And then when they have the $300,000 down payment, they try to go and buy the house and said, no, you need like $400,000 now because the price went up.
Right.
So, okay, then they save $400,000, and then they go back and say, okay, now we want to buy it. Now you need $475,000. So, okay, well, and just like they
Right.
just keep chasing this thing. And when I did, I mentioned to you earlier that I sold my house, and the cost of my owning my house with the property taxes, with the insurance and stuff like that, was like $6,000 a month. That's how much it was. And I was able to, and it was 1,700 square foot, 4-bedroom house in California, in San Francisco Bay Area. And then I decided to say, okay, well, I did the math. I looked at the math and say, but look, I can rent this house, a 2,200 square foot house with a view, with an updated kitchen, with all of that kind of stuff. And it was $6,000 a month in rent. And I didn't have to, pay anything. I didn't have to do any renovations, anything like that, right? So it's just like, it's a better house, a view, all of that. And so that's kind of how we moved out of that. And then I was able to take that equity that I had in my house and then invest it in real estate, because I had already started to invest in real estate. And I was looking for ways to get that equity to work for me.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who maybe are in similar situation to you. I would say if you if you um, if you are in a spot where you feel like after you said you do the math and it doesn't make sense to invest in your primary residence, it may be smart to rent, as long as
Mhm.
you have another vehicle. It doesn't even have to necessarily be real estate, but another vehicle that's going to begin producing income or growing
Right.
and inflating along with it, so that you aren't just a perpetual renter who's stuck in the W-2 rat race.
Mhm.
I like what you said too, that you use the equity to buy real estate in perhaps a better cash flowing market.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I did. I bought a couple of apartment buildings in downtown Memphis, midtown Memphis, and the rent from that down payment, from the money, that the equity that I got out of the house, paid for my monthly rent of the new house that we were renting.
Yep.
So I was basically living for free. So I just quit my job right there and then, and because that, my all my living expenses were covered at that point.
Yeah.
So
So
don't fall, like let's do the math. I mean, some other areas it's different. Obviously, I'm talking about the Bay Area, which is the prices are just insane.
mhm.
In Pennsylvania, it might be a little bit different. I know that in Tennessee, it's probably better to it's a little cheaper to buy a house than to rent a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although almost every market is up
That's
double
right.
double digits over
Yeah.
a year ago. It's insane. But
Yeah.
I'll say this too, some people in California, because I've coached and talked to a number of California investors, and sometimes they don't want to sell. They like where they are, or maybe their kids are in school or something. But that doesn't mean that you're stuck. There's
Yes.
plenty of California homeowners who have tapped the equity in their home in the form
Yeah.
of home equity line of credit, and
Yeah.
then use the HELOC to invest in
Yeah.
other cash flowing markets.
That's true. Yeah,
And
that's true. And I had done that initially. So I took some line of credit up that I maxed out on the line of credit. But then at one point, then you kind of, okay, so this is, okay, this is doing well. This is like the real estate side is doing well. I'm making money. It's like, let's take the next jump. You know, there was bigger things. I knew there was bigger things coming down.
So sometimes that's where people land. You know, the good thing about a
yeah,
HELOC is it's going to be very cheap, especially again when your primary residence is the collateral.
yeah,
Tends to be the cheapest way to borrow money, and you get the most favorable financing terms. You know, when I was teaching, I didn't have access necessarily to a lot of cash or a lot of
hmm
cash flow, and so I had to use the best available financing options for me.
yeah,
And the way that we did it, you know, we bought for 3.5% down payment
hmm
on a $175,000 duplex in 2008. Now, here's the thing, that kind of a down payment is really only going to be available when you're an owner occupant. An FHA is only available to
yeah,
owner. So
yeah,
if I had needed to save up, like you were saying before, if I had needed to save up a 20% down payment
hmm
for a $175,000 duplex, that's $35,000, and forget it. I didn't have it. It would have taken
yeah,
me a decade to
yeah,
save up that amount of money.
yeah,
But what the good thing about being an owner occupant and house hacking is that you can use the government subsidized FHA program,
hmm
which provides you a very small cost of acquisition, and you're gaining control of what is functionally an investment grade asset
yeah,
that you can, you know, I knew when we bought it, we're not going to live here forever.
yeah,
And so we were able to move into it with a very low cost of acquisition.
hmm
So
yeah,
I think we spent $8,000 to close. And immediately upon closing, we controlled a $175,000 asset,
hmm
which
yeah,
means that all of the inflation on that asset came to us as the, you know, controlling owners.
mm,
All of the cash flow came to us. So that's an important thing I want to point out to your listeners. Some people, because their W-2 is maybe very highly compensated,
yeah,
they can gradually build maybe a portfolio of index funds or of passive investments, and they, you know, they're able to save maybe 50, 60, 70% of their W-2 income and put it into that.
yeah,
But a lot of people, that would take them 35 years, and they'll spend the best and the golden years of their life trying to accumulate enough assets to pay for their lifestyle.
hmm
So I think a good shortcut is if you can gain control of a large asset, whether it's real estate or a business of some kind, a
yeah,
leveraged asset, then you are gaining from the appreciation on that asset and from the cash flow that the asset produces. And
yeah,
so for my money, an FHA loan is one of the best ways out there to gain a large asset for a very small cost of acquisition and very favorable interest rates and
mhm,
attendant fees.
yeah, yeah. That's right. I think that's a great way to get started, definitely. And real estate is the key to real estate, and why it's so great is leverage. So if you do FHA loan and you have to put only 5% down, so you're maximizing leverage is always the ideal way to maximize your return.
Yeah.
And yeah, you control a bigger asset. The big asset is appreciating, especially over the last year or so. It's been appreciating double digit in just about every market that I know. So it's been a great year for people that owned real estate.
Yes.
So I think this is very important. The other thing too is that, so Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think it's a great book. It's inspiring and all of that, but they don't tell you how to do this. Like they don't,
No.
they say, yeah, just go and do it
Right.
and
Yeah.
do real estate, but they don't tell you how to do it. And
No, you're right. It's not very granular.
yeah,
Uh, and that's true. But I think you need, it's funny, I think for most people, until they have the 30,000 foot airplane view of
yeah,
what's possible, a lot of times they don't have the patience for the granular details.
yeah,
Or they don't see why they should invest in maybe more ground level expertise because they're not seeing the big picture. So you're right.
yeah.
For me,
That's a good
Rich
point.
Dad Poor Dad, it was just remember, I came into it only thinking that you could make money from your W-2 job.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that was the framework that had to break open for me first was that.
Yeah.
And then of course a lot of the details, they're going to differ per market, per property, per borrower. So you really can't give too many specifics. Now in my
Yeah.
book, I do give a little bit more granular details on how we did it because I think it's
Yeah.
important. And I was
Yeah.
only really shooting for one sector in this book for how to
Hmm.
do that. And
Yeah.
but that's
And
because
one strategy, right? The house hacking strategy, really. That
yeah,
is that the focus? Yeah. Hmm.
I think so because it's a great starter
It
method
is. Yeah. Yeah.
for someone who maybe is not making a bundle of money in
Yeah.
their W-2. So, and for us, that worked out really well. It taught me to play the cash flow game.
Hmm.
A year later, maybe a year and a half later, we refinanced out of an FHA loan and into a conventional loan. We had
Hmm.
gotten enough appreciation in the market that we were able to have enough presumed equity to refinance into a conventional loan product.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so our fixed costs dropped to $1,100 a month to live there, and
Yeah.
the rent on the first floor was up at $750, maybe even $800 after a
Oh
year
yeah.
there. Well,
Wow.
now our kick-in was only $400 a month,
Yeah.
which was just great.
It just gets better. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah.
And then the other thing it
So
allowed us
yeah.
to do was we
Hmm.
we rinsed, lathered, and repeated that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, just in passing before we move on, when you
Yeah.
move out, if you have owner occupant financing on a house hack, there is no obligation to refinance into an investor loan, which are more
Yeah.
expensive
Yeah.
than anything like that.
Yeah.
You're not
Mm.
obliged to stay in it. Now, you're obliged to actually reside there at some point. You can't pretend that you're going to live somewhere and then
Yeah.
not live there. You have to do it. But so when we moved out, we didn't need to refinance or change any of the loan, product, and we had really low 3% interest, and we had
Yeah.
a 30-year fixed term on the mortgage, that's great money.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Great.
it's very good.
And then it also freed us up to use another owner occupant loan product, to buy our next place and to do the same thing and sort of rinse, lather, and repeat.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
that's the low down payment way to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, as you get into the bigger stuff, the methods change, and at this point, we live in a house that we don't want to move out of, and my kids are happy
Yeah.
with the schools that they're. We have 4 daughters at this point, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
We live in a five.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I finally have my own bathroom and bedroom. Well, that's not true. I share with my wife, but everybody has their own bedroom, so it's I'm
Nice.
in the school district where I want them to be.
Yeah.
It does change, but let me tell you about the next echelon up for building
Yeah.
cash flow.
Well, before we go there, let's talk about kind of like the mind shift as well, because I think that's very important. I mean, so yeah, people are going to listen to you and I and stuff like that, and how we kind of jumped into it and we did this. But there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of maybe it's not the right time. Maybe I should wait until the market drops and then buy, or that kind of stuff. So what do you say to these individuals?
Well, the first thing I would say is it isn't for everybody,
Mm.
right? It can be for anybody, but by definition it isn't for everybody. It's just some people aren't built for it. For some people, it doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. My sister and her husband, they spent the last 7 years, 8 years, 7 years, going to medical school and then doing emergency room residency. Okay, and during that time, my brother-in-law he's a fairly astute investor.
Yeah.
They bought as their primary residence a flip, a house that had already been flipped. And if
Hmm.
you're an investor, you realize going into that means there's no meat, there's no meat left on the bone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? So I went to him and I said, why would you do this? You're not going to have the equity appreciation from it. And his response was, well, Bryce, I spent four of the last years. They did this at the end of medical school and the beginning of residency.
Yeah.
And he said, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on med school tuition, and now I need to be a very good resident so I can have a large payday at the end of my residency and get a contract with a hospital system. He said,
Hmm.
so my best return on investment right now is to come home to a house that's already finished, that doesn't need a lot of work from me, where my kids are not living in a war zone, where my wife feels comfortable. And,
Yeah.
as I thought about it, that's absolutely true. For them,
Mm.
the best investment was something that was already finished, because he has a very high yield job where
Hmm.
he was going to get paid a lot of money. And so for him,
Yeah.
that was the best investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
On when After they're situated and his debt's paid off, maybe he comes back to me for
Yeah.
syndication and starts giving me money to put into investments. But I agree with their pursuit of just
Hmm.
settling down
Yeah.
and
And I think also temperament as well. I think people, I mean, we sell turnkey rentals to investors who want to build a passive income portfolio. And and some of them, they're not, I mean, this property management that takes care of everything and all of that. So it's really truly turnkey. And some of these investors, they're nervous sometimes about the report that they're getting from the property management company, and about silly things that to me are silly things. Is like, oh, how come it costs like $25 to change the light switch and stuff like that? I can get one at Home Depot for a dollar. And so, well, so the guy has to go and put his pants on, go in his truck, and go to Home Depot and wait in line and buy the $1 switch, and then drives to your house, and you have to do that, and it's
yeah,
just like that. And then he goes back home and stuff like that. So that's why you're paying $25
yeah,
instead of $1. But I mean, the idea is that as an investor, when you're building your passive income portfolio, you have to think that your job is not to, because some people, they want to do their own property management. So they want to go out there, and I don't know if you have your own property management or if you do it yourself, but to me, it's better to spend your time on building a solid passive income portfolio, and then looking at the big pictures instead of getting the phone call and then getting to fix the light switch on a Saturday when you could do something else.
yeah. Well, and I agree with you. I'll answer your questions. One, $25 is cheap to get someone who knows electrical to change a light switch, because when you change a light switch, you got to turn off the circuit breaker in the box. If you're just changing a light fixture, sometimes all you have to do is turn off the switch and then go change the fixture. But a light switch can be complicated, and if it's a
Yeah,
three-way light switch, that's even more complicated.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I've done it. I've done it all myself.
Yeah, I tried to do it once too.
Um, to answer your second question about myself, I currently self-manage my portfolio. The
Mhm.
reasons for that is because my home market is still a very good market, and I own my 36 of my 38 units are basically within 1/4 mile of each other, and they're all in a nice historic downtown, and so it's very easy to manage that portfolio myself.
Yeah,
I'm local. I live 2 miles away from my portfolio.
yeah.
So management has been easy for me, and that's been a good way for me to preserve some of my cash flow.
Hmm.
But I will say, you're right. The the North Star, or the destination, should be 100% passive investing, where
Hmm.
you're paying property management. I can't tell you. It's sometimes I get those calls in the middle of the night, or
Yeah.
I'm dealing with all that stuff, and in my own life, I'm at a crossroads where I need to decide: do I want to become a busier and busier landlord as I add more units? Which, that's what happens. The more tenants you have, the busier you get. The more phone calls there are, the more things break,
Yeah.
the more roofs, the more gutters, the more sinks, toilets. Is
Yeah.
that what I want, or do I want to work on becoming a better investor
Hmm.
who simply allocates funds and who is able to? Because if you're 100% passive, then there's no ceiling to the return on your time.
Yeah.
Because every time you're investing in let's say a syndication or something like that, or even if it's something just that's actively managed, as long as you get it established and stabilized, you can move on and leave someone in charge who you trust, or
Hmm.
ideally who has skin in the game in the
Yeah.
profit side,
Yeah.
and then move on and do it and just keep duplicating it without it eating up more and more of your time.
Yeah.
I'm in the position now where I have to think, okay, if I'm going to move to the next level, I really don't want to add chores to my
Exactly.
list or to my
Exactly.
list.
And a lot of the people that I work with too, I mean, you don't have a W-2 jobs right now, but a lot of the people that we're working with, they have a full-time job. And, that's why I'm saying, yeah, get property management in place. Like if you really enjoy doing the repairs and doing all of that, and you're handy, then yeah, you can take. I mean, you're going to make more money doing that, but yeah, it's not going to be as passive as having a property management.
Yeah.
So when you don't have your full-time job, then if you want to do the property management yourself, I mean, this is an option, but
Sure.
that's changing one job for another, in my
It
opinion.
is. No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It is. And you can do some things to let it go. For instance, I have a maintenance man who
Oh
lives
yeah,
on
yeah,
site, and I have a bookkeeper. I have a CPA that does my taxes,
yeah.
and my wife runs a lot of the back end for leasing. We have
Oh, good, good.
DocuSign, we have digital rent collection, we have. So there are ways to streamline it, but at the end of the day, it's you still are adding to your time load, and
Yeah,
eventually you'll hit a ceiling where you just can't add any more chores. And you're
yeah,
right, it's one
exactly.
after another.
Yeah, once you get into the 100 units and stuff like that, then it gets a little bit more challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm one of those people who's looking at anything I add from this point on, either will be a flip or I would consider maybe something very geographically close to what I already own. But
Yeah.
beyond that, I don't want. It has to be passive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Very good. Yeah, and then so tell me a little bit more about working as a couple, because I think this is something that's very challenging. A lot of people, they kind of like they're sold on, oh, this is what I need to do, this is what we need to do, but then they have to work with their husband, or they have to work with their wife and then convince them that this is the way to go for us to retire early maybe, but at least retire and have a chance of retiring, because right now even that the retiring at 65 is not even something that's a given for most people.
right, it's increasingly hard. Well, I'll say a
Yeah.
couple things. One is this: when I was looking at making the jump from W-2 to being a full-time real estate investor. You remember I told you that I took the idea to my wife of going to that first duplex, and her response
Yeah.
was, "Are you crazy?
Yeah.
That we're already." So I'll say this: the number one thing is if you have a dream or a vision of growing into something different and
Hmm.
becoming, let's say, a full-time investor or quitting your W-2, I think that's a noble dream. I think it's a good desire to have. And when you first hatch it, maybe you write it down somewhere. It's like a fledgling bird, okay? And a lot of times when you've got that fledgling bird, it can be very easily injured or stepped
Mm.
on or squashed or by even by people who maybe are not who love you or who care about you or who are close to you, parents, relatives, friends, your significant other. So the first thing I would say is this: uh, keep your dreams private at first. It's your dream. Sometimes it on the first go around, it doesn't come out fully formed.
Yeah.
It's not intelligible or anything, and sometimes you have to write it out a number of times before it even coalesces in your own brain.
Hmm.
And so I would say that the first step is get clear on what it is that you want before you start to try to proselytize your significant other and convince them to come on board, because you
that's
may
what I'm doing wrong.
change it a little. Yeah. And I'm serious. Get it. Write down what you want. and so this is, where I want to go, and this is the best way I can see forward with it.
Yeah.
And I'll say the other end of it is this. That's a lot. We desire confirmation as humans, right? We have an idea and we want someone to tell us that's a good idea or to steer us away from danger. And so we're constantly looking for confirmation from experts, from the universe, from God, from our friends, from people who are more experienced than we are. Okay, your significant other, they're not God. That's a lot of weight to put on their shoulders, that your dreams are now suddenly their responsibility, and they may not be built to handle what you're throwing at them. And so they may either give you a bad answer, or you may overburden them with your worries, with your hesitations, with all that kind of stuff. So in some ways you want to protect your own dream, nourish it, get some expert testimony. But in other ways, you want to be merciful to your significant other, that you don't immediately burden them with every little squirrel that you're chasing. Your dream.
Yeah.
So with my wife, it was progressive for her to be on board, and it took me taking little steps and demonstrating that we could be successful with some of the little steps first.
Yeah.
Before she was willing to jump on to the bandwagon of it being full time. So those are the first two things I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's very good advice. Thank you, Bryce. Great conversation. I think this was fantastic. Again, in the notes for the show, I'm going to give all the information on how you can reach Bryce Stewart. Also, the link to his book on Amazon, House Hacker's Guide to the Galaxy. Bryce, thank you very much. Great conversation. Talk to you later.
Absolutely. Eric, before we go, I want to give your listeners 3 quick tools.
Okay. Go ahead.
One is this. I think you should definitely buy and read the book, The Millionaire Fast Lane by MJ DeMarco. It's a terrific book dealing with building a business or building an investment portfolio and leveraging that for financial and time freedom or early retirement.
Okay.
You should also buy my book if you're in a spot where you can do house hacking, where it makes sense, called House Hacker's Guide to the Galaxy. And then the third tool I want to I'll throw out 4. The third tool is this. You need a budgeting app or software. My wife and I use one that's called You Need a Budget, or YNAB. And it has allowed us to budget our household income, because if you're not careful with your household income, then everything you're making from your investments will just go right out the door, and you won't be profitable or hang on to anything that you've made. So YNAB is a great tool. There's other ones too, but YNAB is, honestly, I think it's the best.
Okay.
And then last thing I'll say is this. There's a website called Mr. Money Mustache. It's a blog written by a guy who retired at age 30. And he did it entirely through low-cost index funds, which I think is a great way to have safe, reliable, predictable income. And it should be part of a mixed portfolio for investors and for early retirees. But he explains that on his blog, and I found it to be extremely helpful. And he breaks down a lot of stuff like you did, where he talks about, does it make sense to buy in the market where I live? Or is it a better investment to rent and allocate my funds somewhere else? So those are some tools that your listeners would benefit from.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Bryce. And I'll put that in the show note as well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Break Away from the Rat Race with your host, Eric Martel. If you want to share your story and experience with our listeners, please message us on Facebook at Break Away from the Rat Race. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on iTunes.